Welcome to Front Porch Politics, conservative conversation for a complicated country. And now, your host, the pontificator of common sense and coffee connoisseur, David Mark.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Front Porch Politics. I am your common sense educated coffee connoisseur, PhD graduate with a degree in Mayberry Studies, host David Marks. We're so glad you are joining us for this podcast. Before we jump into the podcast, I always want to take just a moment to remind you to go to davidlmarks.com. You can go and listen to all of our old podcasts. We want to remind you that we do a daily posting of our favorite Bible verses called Daily Manna. You can also check us out on our social media accounts. At Twitter, it's at Front Porch Rep. You can find us on Facebook at Front Porch Politics Podcast, and we want to thank those of you who have recently liked our page and follow us there. And we also can be found on Instagram, where you can find great photos of not only our podcast and what we're doing, but also fun stuff like our mascot and number one pet, Tucker. He's a Snorky, and he is always having fun. As we get into our podcast this week, we're going to cover a topic that has been a hot button topic for a while in America, and it may seem like that we focus on this a great deal, but there's a reason why we do. Because in America, there was once a time in America where people may differ on the policies that our country should have, but both parties, both Republican and Democrat Party, were pro-America, and they may have had disagreements on military spending or on budget, but it seems like we're having this great divide in our country between these two parties. It's needed to be said that this podcast is not a political party-based podcast. This is about the conservative theory and conservative way of life. Now, some of you may ask, what does it actually mean to be a conservative? Well, there's several types of conservative. There's no doubt there are political conservatives, of course. There are financial conservatives, fiscal conservatives, we may call them. There are also those of us who are moral conservatives, if you want to put it in those terms. There's religious conservatives. There are religious liberals out there. One thing I've noticed about our podcast, and from looking at the statistics from our website and from the podcast listeners, we see that we're pulling in people from all across the 50 states, and we love to reach out to everyone. Now, you can leave feedback on each podcast, and I love to hear from you. Whether or not you agree or disagree with me on what we're saying, I still want to hear from you. We had a gentleman from New York State who recently left us a comment, and I love getting those comments from those of you who are in different states outside of the realm of the state of Alabama. Now, of course, this is my home, and we see a larger audience from the state of Alabama than most might think that we would have in other states, but it's not our largest. Our largest audience is coming from California, so that lets me know that there are people who, if not agree, they're listening to, and we can have conversations about what's going on in our country. All that being said, and I guess trying to segue into today's podcast, the Democrat Party. Now, I was raised a Democrat, and I've told several of you that. I've shared that with you before. Both my parents were of that party affiliation. However, the Democrat Party that my family was a part of, I should say, has left its base, and they have left the people of Alabama, just to be honest with you. Now, we are seeing more and more scandals out of politicians, which really makes me scratch my head as to what some of these politicians are doing. As far as what is going on in Virginia right now, we have a governor who, in the 80s, painted himself in blackface or was dressed as a Klans member. Both ideas that my parents never supported. My parents always taught me that no matter what someone's skin color was or what someone's ethnic background, that didn't matter. It was about the character those people have, and I still continue those traits today. I am a Christian. I'm not ashamed of that, and that being said, I feel like that Christianity is the equalizer among all of the races. To build on that further, however, the Democrat Party has been hijacked. The Democrat Party has been hijacked by some extreme ideologies, some extreme people who have far out ideologies, and just to be honest with you, there's no common sense basis for what they think. The wing of this Democrat Party that I'm talking about are the Democrat Socialist. The Democrat Socialist Party of the Democrat Party, they're starting to push ideas that have no rhyme or reason outside of they think that it's going to be a millennial puller of votes. They feel like they're going to pull millennial votes by the ideas that they're pushing. Well, some of those ideas are not congruent with what we may think of as American ideas. When I think about America, here's what I think of: liberty, freedom, hard work, determination. There's dreams there. Dreams that people can become anything they want to be. If we still lived in a tiered system or a class system, a feudal system, as we may say, that existed in our parent countries or in old countries, there's probably a slim fighting chance I would have ever been able to go to college. But in America, I could. In America, I could grow up in a lower middle income home in a rural town in Alabama, and I can reach you through the innovation of people who have done such work as broadband internet. And that is what makes America great. We always had this ability to dive in and work hard to achieve a common goal. Now, I'm not going to touch the State of the Union outside of a comment I'm going to make. President Trump made a comment, and it made Bernie Sanders mad, and this is one of the people that I'm discussing as far as what our topic will be today. He made him mad because he said that America will never be a socialist country. Now, let me say this first. I believe that we should have social programs in our country. As I've told you before, and I will say it again, I am a proponent for public education. Public education is what has gotten me to the place I'm at today. So I support public education. Does that mean that every school should be the Taj Mahal? No, because we have to be fiscally responsible on how we spend our money. But in our state, we have a Republican governor, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate. And those people in the House, Senate, and the governor's office, Kay Ivey is our governor, they're pro-education. And I can say that with assurance because I met with a representative and a senator just last night, and they are in support of education. The state of Alabama passed the largest education budget ever last year. They're putting as much money as they can into the school system because they recognize how important it is. That is what I would consider a social program, and it's needed. It's needed all across our country. Now, there is a big push, however, in higher education. See, my faith drives most of what I do. I would say that heritage drives some of that as far as how I was raised by my parents. My community may be part of that and my family. I listen to my spouse. I listen to her ideas, and I have a lot of respect for that. Just to be honest with you, she has a lot better ideas than I do. All that being said is my identity, though, is not based off my skin color or even my religion per se. My religion drives that engine, but my skin color and religion are not why I treat people the way I do outside of the fact that I believe in the golden rule. However, in our country, being a Christian, I also support liberty. Because, see, I believe that Christianity granted us liberty. It made us free. It removed the yoke of bondage, and if you want to put it on a theology level, of sin. But I believe that God didn't make us robots. We don't all follow the same steps. And we should be able to discuss those ideas. However, in our country, you're starting to see socialist ideas that are anti-American. And let me give you an idea of what I mean by that. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has unleashed her new idea of America. And she done that just this week with the new Green Deal program. Now, part of this new Green Deal program features plans such as a 70% tax. Most of you, if you've listened to me before, you know that I'm a flat tax proponent. I believe that we should eliminate write-offs, we should eliminate deductions, and we should operate off you pay 10% of what you earn. Now, she also believes in the elimination, and I will say this the best way I can, of cow flatulence and animal flatulence. And we'll get into that a little bit more. And she also believes in rebuilding every building in the United States to retrofit those buildings to fit the standards she wants. Now, it's one thing to have ideas about this, because I understand there's going to be people. Now, I'm a conservationist. I believe in taking care of nature. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I was always taught that you leave nature better than you found it. If you go camping, you don't leave your trash. You clean up your area. However, because of this big push called climate change, which, by the way, there's a podcast about this you can listen to where we actually break down the numbers and we show that our climate is cyclical since we've started tracking it. And it will have its ups and its downs, kind of like our stock market does. But these new laws they're wanting to implement, in this 2019 hashtag infected world, climate change is one of the big pushes to push a socialist government agenda. And there's much, much more to this law that we're going to get into. But first, let's just begin by stating some facts about Miss Ocasio-Cortez. Number one, she tells everyone that she was born into obscurity when she was not. She was actually raised in a pretty well-to-do neighborhood. Outside of that, she's also stated that people are working in multiple jobs, and she blasts our economy, which is a capitalist economy. This capitalist economy that has allowed our state to spend more monies on schools than it ever has. She's against that. See, she made the comment that people are working in multiple jobs because they have to. They can't feed their kids working 70 hours a week, and that is why our unemployment rate is so low. Now, number one, she doesn't understand our unemployment rate, apparently, because when you have one job, that counts just as much as if you have two. Now, out of 154 million job holders in our country, only about 4% are working 2 full-time jobs. 4%. Now, she compares this to people working in New York City. So let's begin there. Number one, there are people fleeing New York because of their tax base. Their governor recently just discussed that they had lost about $3 billion in revenue because people were leaving. The reason they were leaving is because they were banking on people like me in Alabama paying a higher federal tax to subsidize their taxes. So if you did not live in New York, you were footing the bill for New York. That would be like New York paying the bill for Alabama, and I don't think they should do that. That's our responsibility. So in New York City, the lowest non-tipped wage earner is required to earn $13.50 an hour. Now, according to Ms. Cortez, someone working what she claims is 80 hours a week would make a minimum of $1,080 a week. So those figures are based off having 2 full-time jobs at 40 hours a week. Everyone sees the math here. Now, if an employee is working 80 hours at one full-time job, the numbers change because now they're eligible for overtime pay, which is $20.25 an hour over 40 hours a week. Now, that's going to give you a net income of $1,350 each week. See how the numbers just do not add up? If you're having trouble paying for that, well, let me get into this. She recently stated, and I quote, "It is sad someone can't feed their kids working 100 hours a week." She then goes on to state a lot of people are more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right. Well, if you're factually, semantically, and precisely correct, then you're going to follow the footsteps towards being morally right. You see the right and right and wrong. So she wants to tell us that she wants to have this socialist program that's going to fix this. And this is what this push is all about. Okay? She recently stated that the end of the world is going to take place in 12 years. There's nothing to back this up in science besides she's using some data that could be manipulated. Now, her ideas to solve all these problems economically and with the climate, for that matter, is with her new Green Deal. Her strategy would require the phase out, listen to this, of all combustible engines, that's gas-powered, jet fuel, things like that, by 2030. That means if you had a car before this time, then you would have to have your car retrofitted to run on a battery. Now, there's roughly 260 million vehicles in the United States. Who's going to pay that cost? Is she going to require you? Is there going to be a law that you have to do it and you have to pay out of pocket? Other parts of the new Green Deal include a federal job guarantee, not request, guarantee. Now, this, of course, is required to give, quote, a livable wage, health care benefits, retirement benefits to everyone who works. And this is all based around what she is giving out as a marginal tax rate. I don't want to get into the long story of marginal tax rate. That would take too much time. But if we based it off of that marginal tax rate, she's wanting to take someone who makes over $10 million, which is not me. And for every $1 they earn, they would only get to keep about 30 cents. Now, there's a Medicare tax on top of people making over $250,000 a year of 2.35%. Now, coupled with New York, remember that's where she's talking about, coupled with New York City's state and city taxes, the tax ratio for these people would be 85.04%. In other words, you would earn $1 and you would keep 15 cents. No one's going to do that. People will leave and corporations will definitely leave. Now, the issues with these numbers is that if you implement this tax rate, it would only generate about 72. Now, this is if you implemented her tax rate. It would only generate about $72 billion a year. Now, to compare for Medicare for All, which she wants to also have, that cost would be $3.26 estimated trillion a year and would only increase. So you see where there's a huge shortfall between 3.26 trillion and 72 billion. That's far below the amount gained by taxing the, quote, rich. I want someone to aspire to be better and make more in our country, because those are the people who are going to hire other people. Now, when she was asked about how she was going to pay for this is what she replied. No one is saying how will we pay for Space Force. See, she dodged the bullet there and didn't answer the question. The only problem with that is the estimated cost by our government for the Space Force is $3 billion over a 5-year period. It's not even the $3 trillion that would be required for the Medicare for All. A lot of this is riding the coattails of one named Bernie Sanders. And I would like to call this the Bernie Sanders effect because he comes sweeping in with his socialist ideas. Remember, socialism has not worked anywhere. Even in America, if we took a wealthy nation like America and we implemented socialist ideas, it would quickly kill our economy because the government can't guarantee a job to everyone. They can't pay out to everyone and then collect taxes off of part of what they're paying out. It does not work. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul and rob Paul at a cheaper rate and make as much money as you need for Peter. It just doesn't work. So, his tax plans that he put in place and that he was promoting, when they broke this down, and this is analytics that were done on a financial basis, concluded it would raise taxes on anyone making under $250,000 a year. This would raise the rate at 8.8% on those making under $250,000 a year. So it wasn't just taxing the rich, it was taxing everyone at an increased. So ask yourself, do you want to pay 8% additional more in your taxes each year? And of course that cost would go up because the cost of everything will go up over time through inflation. I thought she was concerned about only raising taxes on rich people at the, quote, tippy top. That's what she told us. But no. So in rolls this new Green Deal. Now, outside of an economic catastrophe that this would be, here's some of the other plans that this new Green Deal includes. And this is a 10-year plan that she wants to implement. Upgrading all existing buildings, as I stated earlier, in the country, for energy efficiency. That means every building would be torn down and rebuilt. I wonder which building in Washington she would start with. Probably the White House because she hates our president. I don't know. Do you want to demolish your home at a cost? What if we said the government's going to pay for every bit of it? Well, then how are the government, what are we going to do to raise the funds to pay for that? By the way, when asked how she would do this, she said, well, the deficit doesn't really matter. That's a big indicator, number one, from someone with an economics degree. Then she built on top of that to tell us that if we ran out of money, we could just print more. Again, this lady has an economics degree from a college. She's a graduate, and this is how she views economics. It doesn't work. Now, working with farmers was also part of this deal, as I mentioned earlier, because she wants to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Wow, I had a hard time getting that out. By eliminating cow farts. How is she going to do this? Because she wants us to quit having unhealthy foods given to people. In other words, if you like a cheeseburger, you can't eat that cheeseburger because we have to eliminate cows. She calls it the universal access to healthy food. That was part of the clause in this. She also not only wanted to give workers a federal job, it was a guarantee, but she also wanted to give you what was called an unwilling to work wage. That means that if you were just unwilling to go get a job, not that you could not because of a disability or whatever it may be, you're just simply unwilling to work. You would rather sit on your tub butt and not do anything, and she wants you to get paid for that. If you have a society where people can be unwilling to work and still get paid, no one's going to want to work. No one will work. There's no motivation there. What drives us to work and work harder and work overtime is to have a financial gain. It's pride in having that working spirit that we had in America for so long. And it was part of that dream that you can work hard enough to become anything you want to be in America. But she wants to remove that. She also wants to overhaul our transportation systems. This is all to reduce emissions. Remember, this is under the guise of the world's going to end in 12 years. Now, this includes expanding electric car manufacturing. Remember, all electric cars by 2030. That's what you must have. Building charging stations everywhere. Who's going to pay for that? And expanding high-speed rail to, and this was the quote, scale air travel or stop it completely wherever necessary. So in other words, if you're planning on taking a trip to Hawaii, you need to go ahead and do it now, because if her legislation were to pass, they're going to quickly start eliminating jets and flying and travel by jets because of the emissions they put out. Now, I'm going to call something here. If these people really believed in this catastrophic climate change, if you're a real believer in catastrophic climate change and you don't drive a car to work and you pick up every can and you don't run your refrigerator at night in your home, I commend you. You are a true believer. You are dedicated to the nth degree. And if you're going to support something, I say support it. But here's why I think this is just a money-making scheme or even a big government socialist scheme, is because people like Al Gore, who put out his movie An Inconvenient Truth, and people like Michael Moore, who tell us that we should have socialism and it's the greatest thing ever, or Bernie Sanders or Alexandria, do you know what they do? They get on planes and they travel all the time. They put out more emissions in their private jet flights when they fly from California to New York than your car will put out in a full year. That's why I say they don't really believe in this. It's all about pushing some type of agenda or about making money, like when Al Gore was selling carbon credits. Yeah, he got pretty wealthy off of that and his movie, by the way. So, continuing on, she wants to develop a high-speed rail system in our country. Think about how much that would cost, number one. Think about the cost of this. Remember, we're only going to be able to raise, they keep mentioning taking money from billionaires. If we took all of the money from every billionaire we have, the grand total would roughly be about $800 billion, and you're only going to be able to do that one time. You're going to make Mark Zuckerberg have a balance of zero, or Jeff Bezos have a balance, or Bill Gates have a balance of zero. You do it one time, you've got $800 billion. That still doesn't even cover the cost of Medicare for all. So you see where this is not a solution. Okay, the federal jobs guarantee. She wants to provide everyone with a guaranteed federal job that gives you a sustainable wage. We don't know what that is. I think they've kicked around $15 an hour. Adequate family and medical leave, paid vacations, and retirement security for every American. This sounds wonderful. It's pie in the sky, but it doesn't work. Now, they also want you to get a new house, health insurance, paid vacations, and like I said, forget about going to Hawaii in a few years because we had to stop cow farts. See, this is why this does not work. This new Green Deal is a bunch of poo-poo. See, America does not produce near the emissions that places like China, a communist country, and India produce. See, she wants to blame America for all the world problems, and it's this racist, bigotry, homophobic, LGBT, blah, 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 that, this white man world that has destroyed America and destroyed our climate, and we're all going to die in 12 years. That's the ideas that she's pushing. Now, I do believe the world's going to get a lot hotter one day, and I think that's going to be a biblical event. It's not going to be because of carbon emissions. So, What's my final analysis on this? Well, the new Green Deal would cost America potentially between 75 to 100 or even more in the trillions of dollars. Trillions. Remember what she said, though. Deficits don't matter. If we run out of money, we'll just print more. Yeah, that worked great for Venezuela. If her ideas are so great and she's so good at this, why doesn't she go to a country like Venezuela and revolutionize that place? They already have socialism in place. If this was such a great idea, Bernie Sanders, who visited Russia in the 80s, should see what happened to Russia. We literally outlasted Russia by being capitalist, and they were a communist socialist society. If China had not adopted a subpar capitalist mentality and had not, of course, stolen all kind of ideas from America, and we didn't buy all our goods from them, they would have collapsed also. See, capitalism is the engine that can drive a financial future that is strong. It doesn't mean that we can't have oversight and regulation. It doesn't mean that companies should be able to hire a 15-year-old and work them 90 hours a week and give them below minimum wage pay. That's not what that means. Capitalism is a system that helps grow an economy. It opens up the free market. And anytime the government gets their hand inside of that, what usually takes place? It's not good. Look at what they've done with Social Security. They've almost bankrupted it. They have to raise taxes to support it. Now, I know the budget that we have coming from the White House now goes over, yes, over the taxes we're going to bring in. Roughly, to give you numbers, and I'm ballparking this, we're going to bring in $3 trillion in taxes, and we're spending out over $4 trillion. That's a deficit, and I'm not for that. We have to make some cuts sometimes. You can't operate your household like that. Our country cannot bear taking on $100 trillion of debt because no one's going to be working, who's going to be contributing, and we will implode on ourselves. Now, this would also completely change this New Deal, Green Wave, whatever program, would completely change our economic system to a socialist society from a capitalist society. It would cause an economic depression that would make the Great Depression that brought in some socialist programs look like a monthly recession where you just overwrote your checkbook by $100. It would collapse our country. There's times I scratch my head and I wonder, are these people really having the best of interest at heart for America, or are they trying to change our country and destroy it? Really makes me wonder. Now, to build on this, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez has stated she's not concerned about the deficit, as I said, and we'll just print more money. Now, obviously, as I've also stated, she's putting that economics degree to good use by showing you that she knows very little. Coming up in some future podcasts, hopefully our next one, it may be the next, we're actually going to do a podcast on where this socialistic mentality is coming from. And as much as I'm a proponent for public education, that is the seed that is planted. Maybe not so much in your K-12 schools. Some of it is taking place there, but not the majority of it. Where this socialist mentality is really coming from is from our universities. Our universities are starting to push this socialist mentality, and it does not work. Remember, I told you she holds an economics degree. Her best ideas for our economy is to print more money, run up debt, and of course, let the government take care of everything. That's not the way our country was structured, so it's a total revolution in America. All that being said, we actually have some audio recordings, and I look so forward to sharing with you. We have some audio recordings of a college classroom. I'm based in Alabama, a pretty conservative state, a laid-back state as far as that goes. This is not a college classroom recording from California or from New York, where we might see these ideas. People in New York voted her in, and they love her for this. This is a college recording that's going to come from a small community college located here in rural Alabama. And you're going to be able to hear what the teacher in that class, the instructor, is pushing on these college students. Not debating, not discussing. He's telling them this is why we should do it. He's even telling them that there's so many other countries in the world better than ours. And you know what? I don't think so. To me, America is number one. Hey, I'm David Marks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. May God bless you and the United States of America. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening. For free resources, additional podcasts, and to join the Front Porch newsletter, please visit davidlmarks.com.